delighted to welcome our final guest speaker of the year, the Right Honourable Nick Clegg MP, and present him with the College of Historical Society's Gold Medal for Outstanding Contributions to Public Discourse. This is a medal that we award to those who we deem to have particularly promoted discourse and intellectualism in the public sphere. Wolfe Tone first won the Gold Medal for Oratory as a student, fighting for Irish unity. Bram Stoker would later go on to win the Gold Medal for Composition here in the Hist. In recent years, we've awarded it to such figures as Aung San Suu Kyi, Mary Robinson, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Nick Clegg is a British politician who I'm sure you all know. He was first elected as a member of the European Parliament in 1999, and later went on to be elected as an MP for Sheffield Hallam in 2005. In 2007, he was elected as leader of the Liberal Democrats, and in 2010 became Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He is currently the Liberal Democrats' European spokesperson, and I'm delighted today to present him with the Gold Medal for Outstanding Contribution to Public Discourse.
Indeed, and thank you most especially to all of you and to the Hist and all the conventions and traditions and values that it represents. I'm genuinely flattered to have received this medal, and I've got it already photographed on my iPhone, and a photograph is winging its way to my mum as we speak. You know, one must always try and keep my parents happy. I'm genuinely delighted to be here, genuinely delighted and honoured that you should bestow upon me this award, particularly given the very glittering array of figures who preceded in the past. Now, you've invited me today to speak about the subject of the moment, Brexit. And I'll start with a little story, actually. A friend of mine who comes from Dublin, who I met on the train between Putney in southwest London and Waterloo in central London just yesterday, as I was commuting from where I live in London, in Putney, into central London. And she is married to someone I've known for 20, 30 years, a Brit, an Englishman, sounds very pro-European, is as downhearted and dismayed as I am by Brexit and by the turn of events in our country. And she was telling me that they were in Dublin recently, having supper with a number of her old friends, her old college friends and school friends. In fact, she studied at Trinity College. And Steve, her husband, was the only Englishman there. And the whole dinner party, as the wine flowed, sort of descended into an ever more ferocious lament, if you can have a ferocious lament, about Brexit. And eventually Steve got up and went to the loo and stayed there for quite a long time. When he came back, one of his wife's Irish friends said to him, You're just too embarrassed, aren't you, as an Englishman, to be at this supper table while we're going on about how ghastly Brexit is. And he says that's exactly what he was doing. He was trying to shun his sense of responsibility, even though he wasn't a Brexit voter himself, not only for what Brexit might do to the United Kingdom, but crucially, and this was the point, what it might do to Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland. There is no other country, I think, in the European Union which is going to be so profoundly affected by a decision over which you have had no control. And as I think a number of friends at that dinner party said, they expressed a fear that Britain might or might not, I'll come to that in a minute, might or might not work out what to do next, and might or might not land on its feet, and might or might not try and make the best of this difficult situation. But all the while, it might be more difficult for Ireland to do so. And that, I think, is immensely, if it does turn out like that, immensely unfair, and I think is one totally obvious explanation for the heightened interest in Brexit in Ireland, as well as in the United Kingdom and other parts of Europe. And you must look, at least this is what I find, you must look, as many people do, from outside the Westminster bubble. You must look at British politics with a mixture, I'm assuming, of bemusement and utter bewilderment. I mean, we have a Prime Minister who wasn't elected by anybody, who actually gave one of the very best speeches I've ever read by a Conservative in the referendum campaign about why we should remain in the European Union, now pursuing a very uncompromised approach towards what has been dubbed hard Brexit, namely not just pulling ourselves out of the political institutions of the EU, but also throwing the economic baby out with the bathwater, and also determined, she declared this, to pull us out of the single market and the customs union. You have, in other words, you have an unelected Remainer pursuing a hard Brexit strategy. You have a foreign secretary who, by all accounts, never wanted to leave the European Union in the first place and just thought it would be a bit of fun to kind of strike a pose in the campaign. Whoops, it all went a little bit better than he kind of wanted it to. You have all the people who got us into this mess in the first place, Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage. The moment they got their victory, running for the hills and not taking any responsibility for what happens next. You have a man who, by any other account, is a spectacular political failure, who stood 7 times for Westminster and never got elected, Nigel Farage, who is yet now has conferred upon him gravity-defying political powers, and apparently is now the world's most powerful politician's best friend. You'll remember that photograph, perhaps, if you haven't seen it, it's worth looking it up online, of the two apparently great champions of the people. These are the great populists who stand up for the little man and the little woman, who stand up for the poor, the forgotten, the left behind, the overlooked, posing like grinning schoolboys in a gold-plated lift in the Trump Tower. This is the populism which is now going to represent all those forgotten millions in the hands of 2 of the more insincere politicians I've ever encountered in my lifetime. So British politics is really in an extremely topsy-turvy phase. You have an opposition party, the Labour Party, which is supposed to be pro-European, is supposed to care about these things, and yet has a leader, a very nice chap, but in Jeremy Corbyn, someone who's probably more keen to talk to you about his allotment than he is about the future of the United Kingdom in the European Union. And actually, who voted, astonishingly enough, voted alongside the then only UKIP MP, alongside Michael Gove, alongside Bill Cash, alongside John Webb, alongside all the true hardline fanatics in favour of Brexit, in that fateful vote some weeks ago to trigger the process of Britain's final departure of Brexit. So much for Labour's great internationalist credentials. So I am with you today at a time of bewildering volatility and a sort of time of almost sort of political cross-dressing, the likes of which I cannot remember in British politics, and which I suspect will pan out, by the way, in the next 5, 10, 15 years in quite unexpected ways. I don't think that the tremors, the political tremors and the aftershocks of this great earthquake, which took place on the 23rd of June last year, have remotely played themselves out yet in full. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they lead to wider and deeper realignments of British politics in the years to come, as politics in Britain, and this is of course happening across the developed world, in Europe and North America, is moving from a kind of paradigm that I grew up with. I've just turned 50, and many people grew up with, which was a politics neatly divided according to left and right. Either in favour of high taxes or low taxes, the market, the state, the public sector, the private sector, the bosses, the workers, the north, the south. And it was all, of course, until 1989, an ideological landscape neatly divided or neatly organised by the backcloth of the Cold War. This overarching standoff between Soviet communism and the capitalist West. That was the politics I grew up in. And the British political parties certainly still line up according to this sort of political ruler, which goes from right to left and organises people along that spectrum. And that, I think, is now giving way to an entirely different division of labour, an entirely different sort of landscape in which it is no longer really about high tax, low tax, market, state, and so on. It's now about, I mean, you can slice and dice this so many ways. Some people talk about globalists versus nativists. I isolationists versus internationalists, people who are open to the world and believe that globalization cannot be reversed or stopped or thwarted, and those who want to close themselves from the world and think that globalization is the source of all of our problems. And I think that new distinction, which is replacing and displacing the old left-right division of labour, is a work in progress in Britain, but has clearly been accelerated and catalysed by this extraordinary eruption which took place on the 23rd of June last year. So, what does it all mean for you and for us and for those who care about the extraordinarily intimate linguistic, cultural, historical, social and economic relationship between our two countries? And I just looked this morning at some of the examples of the astonishing interdependence between our countries just on economics. 40% of all agri-food and drink exports from Ireland go to the United Kingdom. 90%, here's a factoid I saw this morning, 90% of all mushroom exports from Ireland go to the United Kingdom. 500,000 pigs travel back and forth across the border between the Republic and Northern Ireland and back. In 2012, the last commercial flour mill near here in Dublin was closed. So for commercial baking purposes, all the grain grown in Ireland is transported to two flour mills near Belfast every day in lorries trundling up across the seamless, invisible border, I'll come to that in a minute, and come back again for the flour then to be provided commercially baked. In other words, the very fabric of our everyday life, from our mushrooms to our bread, to our kith, to our kin, to the television we watch, the books we read, the celebrities we follow, the songs we sing, is shared in a way that is, I think, impossible to duplicate or match almost anywhere else in the European Union. And so it's right for me to try briefly to address what it means, what comes next. And let me start with the most difficult thing of all, which is the border. This border which has been the source of so much conflict, animosity, violence, bloodshed, and division over such a long period of time. It is one of the most uplifting achievements of what statesmen and stateswomen can achieve and have achieved in the past, that border has gone, that it's gone, such that people now don't even care where those flour mills are now located, north or south of the border. And the danger, obviously, is that because of Theresa May's choices, and it's very important that I stress this, these are choices. Theresa May didn't need to interpret the vote on the 23rd of June in the UK in the way that she has. She has chosen to interpret it in the most uncompromising manner. She could have said last summer, she could have made a speech, once she sort of gathered her breath, suddenly finding herself much to her own surprise without a vote or a shot being fired in number 10. She could have gone up, she could have said to the country and indeed to the world, she could have said, I don't believe this is right for the United Kingdom, but it is my duty as a Democrat, of course, to act upon this mandate and to pull the United Kingdom out of the European Union. And I will do it. Brexit, she might have said, means Brexit. But, she would have said, I'm acutely aware that I'm now the Prime Minister of a deeply divided country, where London, Scotland, Northern Ireland voted quite differently to other parts of the country. And I'm acutely aware of our responsibility towards our neighbours, most especially our friends across the Irish Sea in Ireland. And I'm acutely aware that 70% of young British voters, 70% of young British voters, who voted, by the way, in droves, they didn't stay at home, over 60% turnout of 18 to 24-year-old voters, voted for a different future. So she could have said, for all of those reasons, I will ensure that the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, but I will do it in the least disruptive way possible. And I'm not going to throw away the handiwork, the creation of one of my predecessors. Margaret Thatcher was one of the key architects of the single market. It's astonishing. Borderless marketplace of 500 million consumers, the likes of which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And she could have said, I want to safeguard Britain's continued participation in that single market. It won't be easy, but it's been done before. Norway is a member of the single market, even though it's not a member of the European Union. Or she could have said, and at the same time, I absolutely want to remain a member of the customs union, so we don't have paperwork and checks and bureaucracy and red tape at our borders. Again, that's happened. Turkey is a member of the customs union, even though it's not a member of the European Union. She could have said all of those things. People like me would have said, what's the point? You might as well then just be a full member of the European Union. People like Michael Gove would have said, betrayal, that's not what the British voted for. They voted to take back control and tear up the whole rule book. I actually think she would have totally won the argument if she'd done that, because people would have accepted intuitively that in doing so, she was trying to square us up in the national interest. She was trying to reflect the diversity of British society and, crucially, also our responsibilities towards our neighbours, most notably, most importantly, in Ireland. And instead, what did she choose? She chose the low road of what was convenient and sought after by the right wing of her own party and by this cabal of older men who now run large parts of the British press and do so entirely unelected according to their own personal whims and prejudices. So we now have an approach to Brexit for which no one voted for. I spoke to thousands of voters. I don't think a single voter said to me, the one thing I want is to get out of the single market. No, they didn't. They said that they were against immigration, or against red tape, or they just didn't like it. One chap even told me on the afternoon before the election that he was going to do it because he wanted to buy a house and he thought house prices were going down. Another chap, very nice chap, I know very well in my constituency, in South West Sheffield, said, oh, Nick, hello, he said cheerfully, I'm going to vote Brexit. I said, oh, why are you doing that? So, just, rattle the cage a bit. Listen, and then I said to him, and I know he always votes for me in general elections, so he's not, and I said, but, I know that's right. And then he said very cheerfully, oh, but don't worry, you'll win. And then I said, but what if you win? He said, oh, that's terrible. So, of course, there was a huge diversity of reasons why 17.4 million people voted to quit. And it was Theresa May's choice to place party before country and to interpret that very disparate mandate in a very narrow, hard-line way, which will do immense damage. Immense damage, not just to the United Kingdom, but I predict will do immense damage to Ireland as well, unless she changes tack. And this is where I come back to the border. I do not know of any border anywhere, it doesn't exist as far as I know, and I've scoured the records for this, where the nation states on either side of the border are duty-bound, are legally obliged to check the goods that cross that border, and you have to do that if you're out of the customs union. If you're out of the customs union, you are legally duty-bound to check that goods, say, from the United Kingdom, via the Northern Line, don't enter into the European Union's customs union at below tariff. In other words, at below cost. That's what the customs union does. It imposes a single tariff at its border. So you have to check that. I don't know of any example of a country being outside the single market and not having some checks on the services that are provided across the border and of the people who move across the border. I certainly don't know of any border where one side of the border has claimed that the principal reason they need a border is to take back control over immigration, which is what we've been told continually. And then, get this, which is what we're now being told to believe by ministers, have no border checks at all. How can you have a border with no border checks? It just doesn't make sense. And the latest fatuous, laughable excuse that the government is giving is, technology apparently will solve it all. So apparently technology, how? Search me. Technology somehow will check all the people that cross the border, will check all the goods and all the lorries. What? What? I've looked at I've examined the border, which is apparently one of the most high-tech borders operating between the European Union and a third country, the one between Bulgaria and Turkey. Turkey, remember, is in the customs union. So in theory, you shouldn't have to need to check the paperwork of the goods going across the Bulgarian and Turkish border, as we will for goods crossing between the Northern Ireland and the Republic in the future. There are huge queues there. Even in that borderless border, there are huge queues. Look elsewhere, Norway and Sweden. Not in the same customs union, but they are in the same single market, and they are in the European Economic Area. Fewer border delays than in Turkey and Bulgaria, but significantly greater delays. Significantly greater delays than those that exist in the non-existent border we presently have in the island of Ireland. So I am wholly unpersuaded that these opportunists and charlatans who led the Brexit campaign, Farage, Gove, Johnson, even thought, well, actually first they didn't think they were going to win, so they lent no thought at all to what it means to you and to your community and to folk living on both sides of the border in Ireland, because this will now be the new land border between the United Kingdom and the European Union. We don't have a land border with the European Union, and we will. And so, in my view, the only way forward is for Theresa May to retreat from some of those decisions that, as I explained earlier, she took for nothing more than base political reasons. She retreats from those, explains to the British people, explains to the rest of the European Union. She's had second thoughts. She's now finally worked through the consequences of proceeding with her hard Brexit approach, not least the disruptive effects on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And she's going to do everything she can, including possibly safeguarding continued membership of the single market and some form of, as she initially had hinted at, some form of associate member or associated membership of the customs union to minimise the disruption in Ireland. I think where they found themselves, which is an uncompromising hard Brexit stance, which is apparently all going to be solved blemish-free by technology, is a complete illusion. And the better we all, and I would not that I'm in any position to do so, and I would urge the Irish government itself, in private, if not in public, to say so to the British government. This is a nonsense, and they are playing with fire, because any kind of border controls will clearly have a political resonance. None of us want to see that again. So that's the first point about what next. Two further points before turning to you for your comments and your questions. I think it's tremendously important to consider not only, of course, what all this means for the United Kingdom, not only what it means for the island, but crucially what it means for the rest of the European Union, for the 27 EU member states that make up the European Union once Britain is left. And there's been some very good news recently that suggests that the darkest days of the Eurozone crisis are not over. There's no cause for complacency, but are certainly starting to ease. You're seeing growth rates in France, in Germany, Spain, other member states, which will exceed the growth rates in the United Kingdom. You're seeing sky-high rates of unemployment starting to come down for the first time in a long period of time. And even the endless cycle of crisis summits about the latest bailout for Greece, appears to become sort of part of the furniture now, and not a sort of existential crisis for the Eurozone as a whole. And of course, Ireland has played an absolutely vital part in enduring and withstanding and absorbing and digesting the economic and social hardship that came with the financial crisis and that came with the stresses and strains in the Eurozone, and coming out not without problems, not without scars, but nonetheless coming out the other end of that very, very difficult experience, able to look forward to a more positive economic future. And so I believe that Ireland could play a tremendously important role, particularly if Emmanuel Macron is elected in Paris, but perhaps most especially as well if Martin Schulz becomes the next Chancellor in Germany. I believe there's a real once-in-a-kind-of-decade opportunity for all the countries of the Eurozone to say, look, let's settle the imbalances in the Eurozone once and for all. Let's not sit on our sort of hands or in any way be complacent about the kind of better economic news. Let's use the breathing space afforded by that better economic news to settle some of these profound imbalances. And they are profound. I mean, there are profound design flaws to the Eurozone. There were, bluntly, a number of countries admitted into the Eurozone which shouldn't have been admitted into the Eurozone, and were admitted for political reasons. And you've got this very stark north-south difference, where the creditor north, particularly Germany, Finland, Australia, Netherlands and so on, feel resentful that their taxpayers are constantly having to pay out bailouts for countries in the south, and countries in the south feel very resentful that they're having to, cut public expenditure and impose austerity on their own populations because they're being told to by those unyielding, unflinching paymasters in the north. That is no way to carry on. You have to find a new north-south deal in the Eurozone in which the creditor nations of the north accept that in one shape or form, and you can do it lots of different ways, you can either write a cheque, or you can neutralise debt, or lots of different ways you can do it, but in one shape or form, bluntly, German taxpayers are on the hook for the liabilities in the Eurozone, and in return, the South, if I can talk in such summary terms, commits to doing the homework and the hard graft and the reforms and following the fiscal discipline without which a Eurozone is not sustainable. I think there is a unique window of opportunity, economically and politically, for that finally now to happen. And that will be not only very, very good for Ireland and for all countries in the Eurozone, it will be absolutely essential for the long-term prosperity and sustainability of the European Union, and actually, I would argue, good for the United Kingdom as well, even as we leave the European Union, because there is nothing to be gained on top of the, I think, spectacularly ill-judged economic self-harm which Britain is now imposing upon itself through Brexit, for that to be aggravated still further by way of a continuing rash of crises in the Eurozone. So, whilst it's not directly relevant to Brexit, I actually think Brexit might turn out to be a catalyst for the very opposite of what all that cast of opportunists that I told you about earlier had predicted. So you listen to the Farages and the Goves and the Johnsons. For years, they would have told you that the Eurozone is a basket case, Johnny Foreigner across the channel doesn't really know how to run an economy, the British economy is a sort of virile, muscular, proper free market economy, whilst that sort of sclerotic dirigiste economies on the other side of the channel are hopeless, and the Eurozone is a lamentable political project which is just doomed to fail. That is genuinely what they think. And they also think, by the way, and they've made no secret of it, if you listen to the arch-Brexiteers, that they hope that Brexit will be the first domino in which further dominoes will then fall, and that Brexit will be the trigger which will lead to the wider collapse of the European Union itself, which, as you will recall, was also at least the earlier opinion of President-elect Trump as well. I think there is now accumulating evidence that possibly, the very reverse of that the existential threat that Brexit has shown is actually leading to greater solidarity amongst other EU member states, that the better economic news is making the Eurozone feel more self-confident, and as I say, certainly the conversations I've had in Berlin and Paris lead me to believe that in those two powerhouses of the European Union, they understand there's a real opportunity to finally settle some of these economic and political imbalances as well. And I think Ireland will play an absolutely vital leadership role in that, because Ireland did, for better or for worse, did the homework, took the punishment, swallowed the medicine, and has come out the other end, and therefore has a great credibility in these discussions in the future. Final two words I really just want to just lodge in your mind. One is geography and one is generations, two Gs. One of the many intellectual failures, in my view at least, of the kind of Brexit ideology, and it is an ideology, it is an ideology in many respects, this belief that you can sort of turn the clock back to a 19th century hermetically sealed nation state, sort of ignore globalisation and so on. But one of the components of the Brexit refrain, and you'll hear it over and over and over again from government ministers and from the Daily Mail and from the Murdoch press and all the rest of it. And you hear it, by the way, especially this week, certainly in the United Kingdom, because various senior members of the government are on various jollies around the world trying to drum up new trade deals, is the belief that there's a great big world out there in which the whole world is apparently clamouring. They're queuing up to do wonderful new trade deals with the United Kingdom, which apparently we've been uniquely prevented from entering into because of our membership of the European Union. But now that we'll be free, with one bound, we're free of this sclerotic, illiberal, bureaucratic monster, we will sign effortlessly, where they will give us everything we want, and we won't have to give them anything they want. We will sign new trade deals with everyone from Papua New Guinea to the United States and everyone else in between. Liam Fox, yesterday, was standing alongside the president of the Philippines, who has become a bit of a pariah on the international scene, because he constantly boasts how many people he's either directly or indirectly, or some people even claim directly, murdered, and urges the Filipino people to basically take justice into their own hands and act as murderous vigilantes. And he quite rightly is being shunned by much of the civilised world. Liam Fox flew into Manila yesterday, had a photo, grinning, standing next to this man, talking about the shared values. The shared values that now exist between Liam Fox and President Duarte. This is how low they will stoop morally in order to scrape together new trade deals as they screw up the economic relationship with our biggest trading relationships right on our doorstep. And here's the thing, this is why I mentioned the word geography. It's based on a fundamental illusion that geography doesn't matter anymore. They believe that you can replace trading relationships with far-flung continents and far-flung hemispheres in a way which will more than make up for whatever you lose in your own hemisphere. It is 24-carat bilge. There is a reason why we trade more with Ireland than we do with China. There's a reason why Mexico and Canada trade more with the United States than we ever will, because we're neighbours, they're neighbours. Even if you double all the trade with this famous Anglosphere that the kind of more nostalgic Brexiteers go on about, if you double trade with the United States, with Canada, with Australia, with New Zealand, with India, double trade with all those, it still wouldn't be as much trade as we trade with our European partners in Europe. So of the many things I would urge you to look out for and treat with great, great scepticism is all this vapid blather about a new global Britain emerging economically, having basically taken two pistols out and shot ourselves so forcefully in our own feet, in our own continent, by somehow making up for it with some tawdry deal with this murderous president in the Philippines. And the second G was generations. The point I came back to earlier. I take an old-fashioned view, it's my last point here. I take the old-fashioned view that when any community, any country, takes a momentous decision about its own future against the explicit, stated wishes of those who have to live in that future, inhabit that future, face the consequences of that future, namely the young, then that nation, that community is on a very perilous path. And in effect, what has happened, by way of the Brexit vote, is a grotesque act of generational theft. We are robbing the next generation of the future that they themselves have said they want. 70% of youngsters said they want a different future to the one which is now being forced upon them. And if we had enlarged, and I wish we had done, the electorate to include 16 and 17-year-olds, I suspect it would have been higher still. And so whilst I am, as you can hear, not wildly impressed by the arguments being deployed in favour of Brexit, and even more unimpressed by many of the pronouncements and actions of the government since the 23rd of June, where I think with each passing week the British government has made a difficult situation only worse, the one thing which encourages me to retain some hope for the future is that in the long run you cannot deny the young the future which they are entirely entitled to shape in their own image. Thank you very much.
So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to address to Mr. Clegg, please just raise your hand. Yeah.
It's becoming increasingly harsh that Russia has to play the US election and they have to gain that. And without England swallowing the same withdrawals here, it looks like there might be more to gain Brexit. Do you think that this is perhaps an illegitimate result?
Illegitimate?
In that it was Russian the engineers.
The Brexit vote?
The results?
No, I don't. Well, I haven't seen any evidence yet that either by proxy or indirectly, or directly, the Kremlin sought to actively influence the vote. I mean, there is an odd affinity between a number of the arch Brexiteers and Vladimir Putin. I remember a few years ago, I didn't work out very well for me, but I challenged Nigel Farage to a number of debates about the European Union 4 years ago, I think. And I remember being gobsmacked in the first debate, early on in the first debate, where he suddenly declared his admiration for Vladimir Putin, who was at the time, of course, annexing Crimea, blowing the smithereens out of lots of innocent folk in Syria. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, what am I to do? And it's just now so beyond the pale. If you say to the British public that you admire this authoritarian character who's clearly just driving a coach and horses through all decent values and standards and disciplines in the international order, surely that's going to put him beyond the pale. And the remarkable thing, in many ways actually looking back on it, was a harbinger of things to come. Far from appalling in the public, he handsomely, according to opinion polls, handsomely won those debates. Maybe my appalling debating skills, I don't know, but I mean, there was just a very early sign that there was an odd ideological thread which runs from the Kremlin to the White House, to sort of UKIP, to Marine Le Pen, to Geert Wilders. There's this sort of odd alliance between strongman politics in the Kremlin and the White House and angry populism in Western Europe. Warped in the extreme. Well, having said that, not as warped as Ian Fox rushing to be photographed next to the President of the Philippines. But so there's a very. So I think there was an ideological affinity, but I don't think there's any evidence that that was what won it. I mean, if anything, on that point, when I look back at the referendum with the benefit of hindsight, if anything, I can think it's remarkable that it didn't win with a bigger majority. Because if you think of the bigger forces that lent themselves to a Brexit vote, I mean, these have been brewing for years. All the commanding heights of the British press have been pathologically hostile to Europe for years. We've been pumping out sort of anti-European crap for years and years and years. We had the migration crisis, which was filling people's evening news bulletins on the television, of all these desperate people in these dinghies and plastic floats crossing the Mediterranean. Nothing to do with the European Union, of course. But the Brexiters very cleverly conflated them. There are very profound concerns, as you know, amongst the British public about immigration generally, which again was harnessed by the Brexit vote. And the Eurozone was limping badly at the time. So if anything, I I don't think it was a Russian-authored campaign, but if anything, what's surprising is that despite all of those factors, still close to 50% of people, as I said repeatedly, 70% of youngsters, voted for a different future.
With the ongoing crisis in the class within the Labour Party and also the movement together capitalising that, where do you see the role of the Labour Party even outside of Brexit and fill that left back to British politics? And also, where do you also see the role of the Labour Party post-Brexit and when the decide to the market? Do you think there's a scope for the Labour Party?
Sorry, last bit?
And where do you see the role of the Labour Party post-Brexit?
As you know, we took an absolute hammering at the last general election. Pushed back massively from 56 seats to 8, now 9. I always thought we would climb back much more quickly than our critics would suggest, but Brexit has, and I wish it, whilst it's obviously a good thing for the Lib Dems, I wish this wasn't the trampoline which appears to be assisting our political fortunes, but Brexit has, of course, given the Liberal Democrats great clarity in the British debate, and clarity is always essential in politics. In fact, clarity is one of the things we've lost in coalitions. Smaller parties and coalitions often do. Happened to the Labour Party here in almost exact parallel fashion. I remember I used to compare notes with Aidan Gilmour, and even though from different parties, different countries, different governments, it was very uncanny how the same adjectives were used about it. Lost your soul, lost your principles, sell out, betrayal, blah. Anyway, that's what happened. Now we've got, it's almost swung completely on the other. We've now got crystal clear clarity on this one issue of Brexit, not least because of the ambivalence of the Labour Party. Where will that take us? Well, clearly growing, we're growing very fast, and winning sort of high elections locally and nationally, and huge numbers of people joining the Liberal Democrats, raising lots of money, here's the dilemma in British politics at the moment. If you believe that this is a rotten government, which I do, if you believe that there is now an umbilical relationship between Theresa May and Number 10 and a self-harming version of Brexit, which I think there is, then clearly the absolute objective has to be to get her out of Number 10 and to stop the Conservatives continuing to mess up our country. But here's the thing. Whilst I know that my party, the Liberal Democrats, led in extremely effective fashion by my successor, Tim Farron, is the only opposition party that is growing, I don't think it's realistic to claim that we're going to suddenly sweep the board and win the election outright in 2020, or the elections. In other words, even though we're the only party that's kind of growing in opposition to the Conservative Party, we can't do what is needed on our own. And that's, I think, the central dilemma in opposition politics at the moment in the United Kingdom. Is that whilst I am as ferociously partisan as the next person in favour of my own party, I'm also aware that no single party can now win. Even if, by the way, Jeremy Corbyn was replaced with a bright, new, shiny, more sort of centrist social democrat figure, Tony Blair circa 1996, in his sort of water-walking days. Actually, Labour still wouldn't be able to win, because what's happened since then, of course, since the Blair era, is that Scotland has been turned into a one-party state. And Scotland used to be the great Labour heartland. Had scores and scores and scores of Labour MPs which they could rely upon being elected in Scotland. That's gone. So the SNP, here's another odd curiosity, which I should have mentioned at the outset. The SNP is doing the kind of job that the Conservatives traditionally felt they had to do themselves. The SNP is kneecapping Labour. And as long as the SNP is strong, the Conservatives are absolutely confident they will never be beaten by Labour. There's no way that Labour, under any condition, can beat the Conservatives south of the border. So the dilemma, to which I don't have a perfect answer, is that politics always draws you towards the sort of tribalism of your tribe. And yet, if we want to do the right thing thing for the country, you actually have to reach out across tribes in UK politics. And as you know from looking at Westminster, Westminster is a very aggressive tribal place. But in my view, if we want to salvage something from the position we're in, then Labour people, centrist Tories, and Liberal Democrats and others just need to start talking to each other more. It doesn't mean that things lead to new parties and mergers. Not even that. It's just comparing notes on the kind of basic ideas which those who are not happy with the trajectory the country is on, the ideas that we believe need to be developed for the future.
For those of us who are British nationals, do you think we're using our right to freedom of movement and freedom to live and work in the European Union?
So, the question for those who didn't hear about was, if you're a British citizen, what lies in store in the future in terms of the freedom to live, work, travel, study, and so on. Well, the first thing is to say, I never believe for a minute that some exercise in mass deportation of EU citizens in the UK or UK citizens elsewhere, which is a good thing since I'm married to a Spaniard and the son of a Dutch woman. It's the most important women in my life. Yes, I lay myself across the road if they were going to be deported. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what is going to happen is I just think you're going to confront a whole lot more hassle. It's going to be hassle. It's going to be, in my view, unnecessary hassle because unless these Muppets who've led us on this merry dance are now completely going to give up on any of the commitments they make to the British people. I mean, they've already given up on 350 million quid to the NHS, the VAT cut, the economic utopia we're all supposed to get. But if they're now, in addition to that, also going to give up on any of the promises they made about immigration, unless they're going to do that, they're going to have to make a distinction between EU citizens who are in the UK up to a certain date and EU citizens who are seeking to come to the UK after that date. And similarly, symmetrically, I assume, there'll be a distinction between UK citizens who are elsewhere in the EU up to a certain date and those who are seeking to go there after a certain date. I don't think you can do that without some kind of great monstrous paper checks where you have to prove where you were and the rest of it. It doesn't mean you won't get to travel, study, or no doubt work. I just think you'll, and it won't happen overnight, we'll just creepingly return to the days of work permits and residence proof and hassle. And of course, the great irony in British politics is that this is all being overseen by David Davis, who used to be the staunchest opponent of identity rights in the MP. And yet I think he will have to introduce, if not, of course, exactly the same, he'll have to introduce some variant of it, lest he is going to be accused by all those Brexit voters who believe there's going to be a great step change in immigration, that somehow no difference has been introduced. So I don't think it will be possible, of course not. We are still part of this wonderfully cluttered, interdependent continent. I just think it's just going to be more hassle.
What do you think of first past the post voting?
Oh, never ask a Liberal Democrat what we think of first past the post. Our eyes start getting a bit weird and we start frothing in the mouth and trembling in rage. It is a ridiculous system. It stinks. It's undemocratic. It's appalling. It's unrepresentative. Any more things you want me to? Let me just give you two little examples. Of course, I say it with feeling because my party is, as you know, all parties in the first past the post system that have widespread but shallow support do very badly. The parties that do very well in the first past the post system are like the Scottish Nationalists, the Conservatives in England. It's where you have deep but narrow support. Because first past the post creates these silos. And it doesn't matter what happens either side, so to speak. The Liberal Democrats, in the last election, where we did so badly, even in the nadir of our fortunes, even in the low point of our fortunes in 2015, we still got 1 million more votes than the SNP. 1 million more votes. And they got 56 seats, and we got 8. I'm mean, just explain to me how it is remotely defensible to have a system in this day and age where a party which gets 1 million more votes than another party gets 8 compared to this. It is crazy. It is crazy. You've got a Conservative Party now with an absolute majority in Parliament. It's a small majority, but it's a workable majority. They got 24% of the eligible vote. What right do they have to hold the sway that they do? All of that are the consequences of this outrageous system, which I'm afraid, I mean, I tried to change it, you might remember that when I was a governor, and spectacularly fair. It is all, I mean, despite whatever they say, the Labour Party will say that they want electoral reform. It might now change now that they realise they can't ever win again. But until now, every time the Labour Party, oh yeah, we believe in electoral reform, we believe in electoral reform, when push comes to shove, and they've actually been asked to do something about it, they've come up with 1,001 excuses why actually this is not the right time. Because a system like that was built to cater to the old politics that I was telling you about. The pendulum swing between the red team and the blue team, where no one else gets a look at. That's what it's built for. So of course, those the same House of Lords reform. Both parties in 2010 had a manifesto commitment to change the House of Lords and shift it to an elected chamber. When I finally drew up proposals for them to do it, they came up with 1,001 excuses why to stymie. It's pathetic, but anyway, that's what vested interests do. As I say, if the Labour Party were to move on this, which I think they might, but principally because of self-interest rather than enlightened self-interest, that would be quite significant, because then you'd only have one party left in British politics who believes in defending first past the post. UKIP doesn't believe first past the post, believes in electoral reform for similar reasons that the Lib Dems, but the only thing we have in common. The Lib Dems do, Clegg does, even the SNP does, even though they're doing very well out of first past the post. If Labour were, and I just kind of think it defies logic that one party can hold the whole electoral system hostage forever. But it's a really rotten system.
Hi, so my question relates to your time in government. So what do you think was the Liberal Democrats or your greatest achievements in government as Deputy Prime Minister?
Oh, nice question. Usually I'll go first. What did this do with that? Difficult for me to answer. I think in general terms, we provided remarkable stability for half a decade at a time when governments were falling like business across the continent. Incredibly difficult times. Really incredibly difficult times. I'll never forget, shortly after I became Deputy Prime Minister, being a rather sort of po-faced Treasury official explaining to me in meticulous terms that the full liabilities of the British banking system, by the way, not too dissimilar to what happened to Ireland, because we had, like Ireland, had this oversized banking system compared to the size of the rest of our economy. But the liabilities, all the toxic debt and so on, in the banks was, I think it was close to 5 times the size of the whole British economy. So, we had this horrendous task of basically, it's like diffusing a huge bomb, just sitting on a bomb. If you mishandled it, it would have made the IMF bailout in the early 70s for the UK look like a Sunday school picnic. And so I think the fact that we created the political stability and space necessary to start undoing some of the grievous damage done to our financial system, to our public finances, to our economy, I'm very, very proud of that, because it was a pretty thankless task politically, but I think I genuinely think that if we hadn't done that, many, many more people would have been out of work, the economy would have spiraled downwards. And then there are individual things, lots of individual things, from shared parental leave, to expansion of apprenticeships, to free healthy meals at lunch for little kids at school, the pupil premiums, the progressive stuff that I introduced. Of all of them, actually, the one I might single out, only because I'm just fresh in my mind, I've just recently seen a very encouraging evaluation of its early effects, was at my insistence we introduced, it's never happened before in the United Kingdom. I don't know what the entitlements are here, I don't think it exists. We provided 15 hours of free preschool support to 2-year-old toddlers from we first started with 20% in entitlement for the 20% of poorest families in the country, and we doubled it to 40% of poorest families. And I'm immensely proud of that, because controversial thing to do, people say it's too young for kids. But actually, the evidence is overwhelming that if you want to break this cycle of social disadvantage in which poor, bright kids don't do as well at school, don't come to great universities and so on, actually, it's more important what you do when they're very young in terms of the formation of their brain, their ability to learn, to mix with other kids, to accept authority from the teacher and so on. More in all the evidence is that the earlier you start with the poorest kids, the greater effect it has. Not now, not next year, not in 5 years' time, but in 15, 20 years' time. So that one probably, as long as they don't reverse it, is what I'm very proud of.
I had a row with a good friend the day after Brexit, and I said to him, it's all Cameron's fault, he's bereft his family. And my friend insists that Cameron's hand is kind of forced by worrying about UKIP and stuff. What's your take? Who's right?
You're right. You're right. Of course. I totally understand why David Cameron and his entourage have persuaded themselves that they were merely passive puppets responding to wider historical forces. They had no choice. Their hands were tied, as your friend said. It was inevitable. It's absolute rubbish. It's completely. Even at the height of all the various Eurosceptic furies in Westminster, the really important thing to remember is that Europe and our membership of the European Union has never been a particularly prominent preoccupation of the British people. Much more, always traditionally, much more wider. Jobs, housing, crime, the NHS, immigration. But even at the height of all the kind of tabloid, confected fury over the last several years about the European Union, our membership of the European Union barely scraped into the top 10 of public concern. So it's self-evident it's nonsense for a politician to say, I was forced to. He was forced to buy his own party. And by Paul Daly, and Rupert Murdoch, and the Barclay brothers, and the nutters in his own backbenches. And because they were worried about UKIP. They have nothing to do with the country. So of course it would have been inconvenient and difficult for him to hold the line. But I say this with some feeling, as someone who held the line for 5 pretty unforgiving years, because I genuinely felt it was the right thing to do. That's kind of what you sometimes have to do in politics. You just hold the line, because you think it's the right thing for the country. And it was a spectacular triumph of politics and party self-interest over the interests of the country. And it's a completely right in history to somehow claim there was this unstoppable clamour from the British public. It was an unstoppable clamour from the tabloids, from people like Liam Fox. But if you're a Prime Minister, that's one of the things you're expected to do, to say no to people who are pushing their particular narrow worldview, particularly if they're doing so against or at variance with what is wider public opinion. So I totally understand why he has to kind of say that, and he no doubt feels that. I know him well. He's not sort of, he doesn't sort of make up stuff. He clearly feels that, but it's a convenient. In my view, it's a rather convenient rewriting of history. Two or three more questions.
Yeah, I'm British. I had the opportunity at the 2015 general election. It was my first time I voted, and I voted for it. And then I moved here to escape the aftermath, I guess. What do you think the future is likely to be for British expats, British students, not Northern Ireland students, specifically people from England, when they go back? What kind of future do you think we can expect Britain to be involved in the future?
Can I ask you, and I don't say this as an accusation at all, I'm just curious, you clearly are distressed by Brexit. Why did you then vote for the Conservatives? Because it was very obvious what they wanted to do at that time. Was it just not?
That's the first time voter.
Yeah.
Most of the propaganda would have told you that, oh no, the Liberals went back and didn't in the end end up reducing university fees. So that, I think, played a
No, I know that about us. I know why you don't vote for the left. very obvious, in the run-up to the election, they wanted to run these huge risks on Europe. So why vote for them?
Because later can't be trusted by my
Yeah. So it was a process of exclusion. Well, that's come back to and by the way, I should think very typical of a lot of Conservative voters. Look, I don't know what's going to happen to our country now. I really don't know. I don't know whether the United Kingdom itself is going to survive in the next 10 years. Because clearly, much though I abhor the opportunism of the Scottish nationalists, it's inevitable that you're going to place huge strains on the family relations that makes up the United Kingdom. If you force parts of the United Kingdom out of the European Union on terms that they don't want, of course that will have a knock-on effect in Scotland, as it already is, and in Northern Ireland. So I don't know whether the United Kingdom is going to survive, and I don't know whether what I consider to be the undercurrent of xenophobia, of chauvinism, of prejudice, which horrifically, I'm afraid, has led, particularly in the immediate aftermath of the referendum, to a significant increase in street violence, in racist violence, in countless acts of verbal and physical prejudice against my wife, who knows Spanish, and she was telling me about a Spanish friend of hers a week after the referendum, who's lived here for 15 years, was talking to her little son in a Sainsbury's, in a very suburban part of South West London, in Spanish. Language, his language, and someone came up and said, why don't you go home and day and do things, which is most people go. I don't know how much that ugliness, that really, really ugly, intemperate mood, which clearly has been legitimised by the Brexit campaign. I just don't know how long, I don't know how much that's going to disfigure British society in the long run. It's one of the reasons why, unlike David Cameron, I haven't sort of quit, like George Osborne's retreated to a well-paid backbenchers, because I think it's in the balance. I think it's really important that people speak up for the values of tolerance and internationalism and so on, which are clearly under threat. They're massive. So I can't give you a simple answer. It's under threat. But it'll be helped if you don't vote Conservative.
Well, I count myself as one of your million voters. And one of the arguments I came across during the campaign back at home was put about by liberally and economically minded people such as Ben Hannon and Patrick Newton, saying that the benefit to the consumer of lowering your import duties in sort of a David Carver kind of way, even if other countries keep their import barriers, their tariffs up against you, outweighs the benefit to the manufacturers of signing trade agreements. How would you counter that argument?
So the Minford, it's the sort of Patrick Minford, Nigel Lawson view of the world, is that we should unilaterally, for those who are not familiar with it, I mean, I find it so crackers, it's just worth spelling out what they say. They basically say that the United Kingdom government should unilaterally remove all protections of all description of exposed and tradable parts of the economy, because on balance it will then lead to lower prices for consumers. Well, the truth is, yes, you probably would lead to lower prices for consumers, and you'd overnight destroy what is left of British agriculture and British manufacturing. So you'd have lower prices and mass unemployment. I mean, it's a classic kind of thing that excessively clever people say, who are very unintelligent about real life. I mean, it's a classic sort of spreadsheet view of it. Yes, in theory, if you were to unilaterally remove all tariffs, butter would be cheaper. But you'd destroy the dairy industry overnight. So the whole, it's a, how can I put it? It's a bit like, let's say if you have two nuclear powers. It's not a great analogy, I'll stop now, I get in trouble. But anyway, the way that we have conducted external trade negotiations for years and years and years is that you're constantly trying to lower the levels of protection, and you're lowering those levels of protection multilaterally. I'll reduce these tariffs and you reduce those tariffs. I'll reduce these protections and you reduce those protections. So that as you adjust to a more open, free trade environment, you do so in a way where there isn't sort of needless advantage provided to one country as opposed to another, and there isn't needless adjustment imposed upon one sector as opposed to another. And they basically throw that all out the window. I mean, it's said by the kind of people who never ever meet members of the public, or never have to stand for election, or don't understand that manufacturing in a city like mine, where I'm an MP, is an absolute integral part of the sort of social and cultural fabric of a place like Sheffield. That the beautiful green rolling English countryside wouldn't be the beautiful green rolling English countryside if it wasn't for the farmers. So I just think it's a kind of, it's a theory, but it's illustrative actually. What happened during the referendum campaign, and is still happening since, is that stuff that is self-evidently bonkers became acceptable and legitimised and mainstream and wasn't properly challenged. It's like the stuff I said earlier about free trade, the stuff in the Fox. There's no evidence at all for what they said. And yet it's constantly graced with, I think, a sort of false varnish of credibility. And one of the things which I think is quite important in British politics at the moment is that there should be people who just say, no, that's just rubbish. And sort of call a spade a spade. One more, I think.
So yeah, maybe this is one thing.
Considering that May wasn't democratically elected, like you're saying, what do you reckon is the possibility of another election happening for 2020?
So there's clearly huge pressure on her, for obvious reasons, to capitalise on the unpopularity and incompetence of the political party opposition. And you can see why that's very tempting for them to do it. It's quite tricky for them to do it because of a piece of legislation I introduced, actually, called the fixed-term parliament bill. So you have to sort of, I won't bore you with it, you have to jump through various hoops now, which does make it a little more unedifying to call an early election for such transparently self-interested purposes. I've never thought she would do it because I know her quite well, and she has great strengths as well as numerous weaknesses. But I just think she's just not like that. She's quite methodical. If she said it was going to be an election, she'd be very loath to go back on it. I think they're probably a little bit worried now that because the Liberal Democrats are coming back in strength, we would pinch back quite a lot of seats in the southwest. So probably she's now got MPs in the southwest, and I'm not sure that's a good idea. And now Article 50 is triggered, of course. I mean, it would be very difficult, it seems to me, for her to explain why, given that every minute and every second now counts, and the clock is ticking, why waste at least a month of those very precious 12 months that you have to settle the future of our country to race around the country on the election campaign. So I think it's highly unlikely. But pretty well all my political predictions have always been wrong. So don't take it